Hello, welcome again to Massive Hawk Talk. We are back today on a Friday bonus episode. Woo! Very exciting. Today we have Ed Brillant on the show, who is going to sit forward and talk into his microphone.
Hello, how are you?
There he is.
There we go.
As well, I have Jeremy Moore. Test your mic. Say it one more time.
Hello, hello.
Looks good to me. A little quiet, so you might have to be a little. I can turn you up. And we start with Bryce.
What's good?
So, very exciting episode. I'm not going to talk much about gaming news unless we have time, which I don't think we will. But we're going to talk about Ed Brillant instead. Let's do it.
All right.
Ed Brillant, you are a freelance artist.
Yep.
You've been in the industry for quite a while. You've been a lead artist as well as an art director.
Yep.
And you have AAA experience.
Yes, I do.
And you also are a teacher at SNHU, as well as a contract and freelance artist as well.
That is it in a nutshell.
Cool.
That's pretty much me.
Yep. I got that from your LinkedIn.
Very
so.
well. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
All right. Let's kick us off. This show is a little bit. These interview shows are inspired by Inside the Actors Studio, and as they say on that show, we start as always from the beginning. Ed Brillant, where were you born?
Where was I born? I was born in Beverly, Massachusetts. Beverly Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's where I grew up, is in that area. Beverly and the Salem area. Kind of bounced between those two places.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's where I
Yeah.
was.
So you grew up there too.
Yep.
Right. So you've been essentially in Massachusetts, New Hampshire area your whole life, or have you
Massachusetts my whole life.
moved? Wow.
Yeah. So,
Hence the accent.
yeah, so I have a pretty, at times, thick. I've tried to get rid of it a couple times and failed horribly at it.
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a choice.
Yeah, no, it's not, 'cause I tried. It just,
You've tried Wicked Had.
I tried very hard to get rid of that accent. No beans.
Yeah. All right. So that's good to know. So very local guy. That's good. So what was your life like growing up? What were your favorite things to do as a kid? Did you have siblings?
I do. So I have two sisters and an older brother. Two younger sisters and an older brother.
Cool.
So yeah, my family. So growing up, art's always been. I was the first one to go to college in my family.
Nice.
And art's always been something that's been, all our family has it. They've always been able to draw and that kind of stuff. I was the only one that kind of brought it to a different level of like, oh, I'm going to actually do something. So because I was the first one to go to college, my parents were like, we don't care what you do, go to college. We don't care. That's great. But as far as, I guess for me, I've been drawing on tables since I was second grade. I can remember getting in trouble because I'd be drawing on the desk, and it would be every week we had to clean our desks, and I would be out calling sick. I would fake sick so I didn't have to go erase my desk and clean it up, or I'd run to the bathroom when that time is. I'd always do something so I didn't have to get rid of that. And I can remember it was every Friday we'd do it, and it was like on a Wednesday I'm sitting there drawing on my desk, and I'm like, the girl next to me would be like, hey, that's a pretty cool boat, huh? And she was terrified. It was terror in her eyes. I'm like, what is your problem? And I look up, and the principal's standing right next to me with a bucket of water and a sponge.
Oh, no.
He slams it on the floor and he's like, clean your desk. I was crushed because my desk was gray. There was no,
Oh my God.
It was just all gray, no anything. There was no spot that wasn't something drawn on it. So it's all, and that was probably second grade. That's when I've always I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I knew that, boy, I love doing that. Mm-hmm. So.
And that's how you bought a spiral-bound notebook to get yourself keep your drawing.
There's actually a little bit of a story behind keeping my drawings. So I would say I didn't start keeping them until 7th grade, 8th grade is when I started keeping my drawings. One of my mother's friends said you should. What I did is I just draw on just a piece of paper. I never kept anything. So I had a folder with, I'd start putting paper in, and then someone's like, you should probably get a sketchbook. And I went and got a sketchbook and then started keeping those. So in my house, I have from the 6th grade. Sorry, 6th grade when I started keeping. 5th and 6th grade when I started. From that point on, I have every single thing I've drawn, and it's giant boxes of sketchbooks and notebooks. And
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I'm a hoarder in that sense because I just can't. My wife's like, get rid of it, and I'm like, there's just no way I'm getting rid of any of that kind of stuff. But it takes up so much space.
Yeah.
Because I drew on everything. And
That's
everything
amazing.
I possibly could, so.
I'd love to see some of those.
I'll bring some in. You can have a good laugh.
Yeah.
Laugh at what I was doing.
Get something from the very bottom of the pile, middle of the pile. And top
I will.
of the
I'll
pile.
grab my oldest, which I was drawing Iron Maiden. Eddie from Iron Maiden was the stuff that I was drawing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I will say this is when I was a kid, the way times have changed. When I was a kid, the stuff I was drawing, and if you saw stuff like, if you brought that to today's where people are drawing, they would have put me away. There's no way they'd be like, that is, I just do monsters and violence. That's all I did when I was a little kid. All I would draw. So like now, there's just no way they would have put me in like a psych ward.
I remember
I'll bring it in, you'll be like, you were drawing that when you're like, there's something wrong. I'm like, no, I turned out fine. I swear, I turned out fine.
I would draw pretty nasty pictures as well, but I turned out fine.
Well,
that's sorry. That's
I live with you.
arguable.
I wouldn't say that.
All right. Back to Ed. What were your favorite like TV shows, movies, and games as a kid growing up? Tough question.
No, yeah, I mean, I can give you. I'm glad you say what is your favorite because there's no way you can place it on a. Maybe you place it on a favorite. So growing up, so not surprising from the last comment I made, horror movies. I actually wanted when I was a kid wanted to make special effects.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you have to remember too, there were no 3D games when I was a kid. There was Atari, Nintendo. That was the big when Nintendo came. We're like, oh my gosh, look at the color and all this kind of pixels, and I didn't even know what a pixel was back then. But I watched a lot of horror movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was watching probably at an inappropriate age I was watching that stuff, but that's just how I grew up, that's the kind of stuff we watched. So horror movies were huge. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. I've seen all of them. Like Clive Barker, amazing. I love watching his stuff. Any kind of zombie movie you can possibly think of. Those are the things I liked. And then cartoons, of course. Transformers, G.I. Joe, Mask, all those kind of things were... I'm a child of the 80s, so there you are.
Would you say that getting into TVs and movies was more viable and more obvious of an option than getting into games when you were that age?
Yeah, so that's an interesting way to look at it. So I was always playing it. So my father's best friend, who was kind of like an uncle to us, he loved games as well. That's why we always had an Atari because my father had one. He liked games, so we'd always be playing games. But it was never a career. You couldn't ever make games for a living. My brother, who was older than me, he was also an artist, but never really did anything with it. He was amazing at games. He's like, I want to play games. So back then, we didn't know making games. He wanted to play games for a living because no one gave him any other. There was no information about that back then. And they were like, nope, you can't do that. You can't make game. You can't play games for a living. It's impossible. So he did a different path. And that's what I wanted to do is, I guess, I can't remember the game it was now. I think it was on an Amiga. And I can't remember it, but I was playing the game and I said, I want to do that. I didn't know what it was or how to do it or anything, but I was like, I want to do that kind of stuff. And it, at the time, and then your question was film more viable? Absolutely. So the point is, there was really nothing for games. There was absolutely no schools, but there weren't even companies around. It was a very small industry back then. So it was more film I wanted to get into, like ILM. Like, I always wanted to work for ILM. That's what I wanted to do. It probably leaned a little bit more on special effects because you have to remember, there were no computer animated, like Jurassic Park hadn't come out yet. It was that, as I was growing up, none of that was really available. It was all stop motion. That's like, and I compare stop motion is one of my loves is stop motion. And that kind of goes into games because you're creating these little worlds and you get to see, and that's that shared passion between very specifically stop motion is where I get super excited about that stuff. There's that, I think it's a flu medicine and they have this guy in a miniature house and I don't know what it is, but when I see miniature anything, I'm like, oh, I love that. I just want to make a little miniature house of my house. Or when you're inside of, this is the crazy that goes in my head. I go into like a Dick's Sporting Good or something, and they show the tents, and they see the little tents as previews. I'm like, I love those. I just want to buy the little tents and put them in my house. So that love for miniature, I don't know where it comes from, but I love that. I do with my kids. We make miniature stuff all the time, like little buckets and little fairy houses all the time. So I still love that. So that's really some of the stuff that I wanted to do, getting into horror movies and making. I used to make masks, and my hand would look like it was cut off and all that. That's the stuff I used to do when I was a little kid. But then I played this game, and I wanted to do that, but I didn't know really what that meant. So I just kept drawing. This was like second or third grade, and it just kind of it went from there. And I was more towards 2D because 3D hadn't come out yet. But then, as time went by, I went to school for animation, and I was kind of jumping a bit. I don't know if I'm breaking your...
yeah, I mean, I was just going to follow up with your favorite classes at school.
Yeah, I'm like, see what just happened. I'll tell you, if you don't kind of wrangle me in...
One question, and that's all
this is
literally,
more...
that's what will happen.
Yeah, you've gone a couple of years before after.
Okay, let's dial it back.
Yeah. So
hour and a half of talking about that was really like, what's your favorite game?
So that's
that was your favorite
basically the favorite
game. Okay, so
I didn't
favorite
think I
game
answered
is
that, did I?
stop motion and tiny things.
Let's just bring
Okay.
it back. Let's bring it
No,
back.
so yeah, I was
Let
thinking.
me just get some of the original question because I go crazy.
Okay, well, my next question is about your, let's think, elementary, middle, and high school life, and like what your favorite classes were, and like just how your kind of school life was.
Yeah, so I come from a pretty poor background. Didn't have much. Was the kid that kind of gave a hard time. Had to literally fight my way through high school. Through middle school. Didn't have the clothes that everybody else had. They called me corduroy boy because corduroys were not in at that time, and that's all we had. I looked like Ernie, more like Ernie from Sesame Street. I had big ears. I had his striped shirts and corduroys and
Nice.
zipping down the hallway. Zip, zip, zip. I got made fun of for that. We were just poor. We just didn't have that much stuff. So fought my way through that stage. I played sports. That kind of got me into a little bit more structure.
What sports were you into?
I played football, baseball, lacrosse. So I played a lot of sports there in high school and when I was in 8th grade. I was somewhat of a troublemaker when I was in the 6th and 7th and 5th and like elementary and middle school. I was a troublemaker. I was in the wrong crowd, that kind of stuff. And then that's when I started playing sports, and it kind of got me out of that, gave me some structure. My goal was, I was like, I'm going to be a football player, and then I'll do art on the side when I was in high school because I had that crazy dream of professional football, which is funny.
Do you
Yeah.
think that the structure of sports later influenced how sort of your teaching style is and the way that you teach yourself new things?
The hard work is, that definitely makes the competitiveness. I'm very competitive with everything that I do, and I know that fed in from the sports and being competitive, trying to get as best as I could with that kind of stuff. So yeah, it definitely is. It definitely has some kind of influence on and structure. It definitely gave me structure to stuff. So yeah, sports were pretty big. And some people will say no, sports don't. I will deny that. For me personally, it was a huge it literally helped change the path that I was going in.
I was the opposite. I never wanted to do sports, and I wanted to focus on like art class and that kind of stuff. And my parents were always like, well, you know, you need, like, all my brothers have done sports, and like you need to do a sport and extracurriculars to, you know, get into college. And so I did like soccer, cross country, track, and tennis, and I hated all of it. And I could never I never got on board. So that's funny. That's kind of the opposite way.
And just to contrast, mine was a complete opposite of that. So when I was done with high school, I was offered to go to Northeastern. Northeastern came and they wanted me to play there, but I wanted to do art. And I said,
Wow.
no, I'm going to go to an art school.
Perfect.
So you see how
segue.
that
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
different. So I ended up going to an art school versus
That
playing
was
sports.
That was my next question. What did you do for college?
So I went to Montserrat College of Art, and I went there under the assumption, their major, they had a 2D animation program there, and that's what I went for 2 years till they dropped it.
Oh no.
And I was like, well, I'm already two years through this. Just going to finish off with an illustration degree. So I ended up getting an illustration degree, which in hindsight is probably better. And I'll tell you because it was just 2D animation, but the fundamental skills that I learned in illustration still carry today that are just indispensable. That's the stuff that when we're making 3D models or environments, that stuff is still, I'm teaching illustration techniques with that. It's just you're doing 3D models, but the same information of reference and understand. Don't be a slave to it, but you have to understand it. Anatomy, that all comes from illustration, and that's so. Without a doubt, I wouldn't have changed a thing. So it sounds crazy. But they didn't. Not to remember, I went to 2D animation. There were no game schools back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Any more questions from you guys?
At
I have
what-
more, but
At what point did you start getting into actually making 3D models for games? Because the industry was way different to get into when you got into it versus when we did.
yeah. So I got out of school for illustration. There are no 9-to-5 jobs for illustration. It's all freelance work and terrible. But in my head, I actually, my senior year in college, I started sculpting. And that's where you start getting to I'm lucky because I'm passionate about art. And whoever has a passion, if you can find your passion about anything, God bless you, that's a great thing. So I found my art, but then there's a subset of that is I started sculpting. I'm like, oh man, this is where it's at. This is what I want to do. didn't know how that was going to transition. So I got out of school. It was more natural science stuff. That's kind of where my thing was too, animals, that kind of stuff. It kind of goes back to creatures, horror movies, see how it all links. So after I got out of college, I worked in a warehouse. It was as simple as that. But I never let go of what I wanted to do. Never stopped dreaming like, okay, I'm going to get there. It's just going to take me time to get there. Now, what ended up happening is I got laid off from that job and got my hands on a physical copy of 3D Studio Max. I bought it from someone I knew who knew someone's like, oh, this company went under, you want to buy the software. Bought the software, and for, I would say 3 to 4 months, 14 to 16 hours a day, I just learned 3D Studio Max. No one taught me how to do it. I just opened the book and went from front to back over and over and learned. Found things that I started really liking, and it actually leaned a little bit more towards animation before modeling. That was actually part of my first job, but that's how it transitioned. Is I found that, learned it, and then still I was working. When I started doing freelance stuff, I was working in a warehouse from like 6:30 to 12 in the afternoon. I would come home, I'd start doing my freelance work till maybe 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I would get up 4 or 5 in the morning, get to work by 6 o'clock, and that was my life, and that was perfectly okay doing it. It's that hard work. You have to work hard in this industry. It's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's kind of how I transitioned from college.
Yeah, you said you worked in a warehouse. I think I heard at one point that you were a forklift operator.
I did some forklift stuff.
So my other question was, what other jobs have you worked, like even in high school?
In high school, so my very first job, I think I might have been like 14. Was I was the mascot? I'm sorry, I say mascot, but I would wear like a George Jetson or Ninja Turtles suit, and I would come outside and say, hey, come see Video Smith, and that was my very first job. Nice. My grandmother never wanted me to be an artist. She said you should be a cook like your grandfather. So she was probably one of the only ones who didn't say go ahead. She was like, she was a tiny little Italian lady. She wanted me to be a cook. That's my first job I started getting into. I worked at like a Walgreens, and I worked there for a little week, and I'm like, this is not for me, and I'd leave and stop and shop. My first week there was hot out, and I was pushing carriages in. I looked up at the clock to see what time it was, and the manager came over and said, stop watching the clock. And I'm like, oh yeah? And I pushed the carriages in. I took my smock, I threw it on there, and I'm like, I'm out of here. Wow. I didn't even get a check. I was just like, I just looked, I was coming in, it's 90 degrees out. I'm just pushed like a million carriages, and the guy's yelling at me not to look at the clock. I'm like, I'm out. So then I got into kitchens. So I started working I was a dishwasher. Worked my way up to a prep cook. Then I started working at a deli inside of a little supermarket, and I worked my way into the meat room there. But I still was working 2 jobs. When I was in college, I worked 3 jobs, probably 40 hours a week, if not more. I worked at a gas station. I was transport for Beverly Hospital, which was some crazy stories there. Morgue runs and all that kind of craziness. It's insane. Oh, wow. So I worked at a gas station, worked at Beverly Hospital, and I worked at that deli. So I worked 3 jobs while I was in school. I would say I didn't have much. Like, remember, I was poor. I put myself through school, so there was I had to pay oil bills, I had to pay rent, I had to pay for my car. So there was no choice in that, and pay for school. So it was like, well, if this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. And that's the only regret I would say I had, is that I worked too much. There was some things I could have let go of that I was like, at the time, I was like, I need that. It's what I want to have. And in hindsight, I should have put more time into what I was doing. And I would say it's interesting because I didn't work as hard in school because I worked so much. But as soon as I got out, you couldn't stop me. I worked so much harder once I got out. I took that information I learned and pushed harder on it because I was able to focus a little bit more on it because I worked too much in school. I try to tell students that as well when I'm advising. I'm like, let go of things that aren't important.
Yeah. Only
do the essentials, because when you're here doing this stuff, that's where your time is going to be huge. That's where it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, it's good to know. Because when we're here, we're always talking about how at least like 80% of our time should be working on art and working on, programming, working on games. Yeah. And, other stuff that gets thrown in is just like so heart-wrenching, like to take well, I don't want to say writing because you're a writer, but if I took like a creative writing class, it makes no sense for me to be sitting writing a 10-page story when I could be, putting all those hours into making models.
Or like portfolio. For us, like RA events that come up, exactly. And then all of a sudden we might have to miss out on like IGDA or something because tragic. Of those. Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad that I don't have I don't work. Well, it's not that I don't work as hard, but I don't have. Like I considered, because I work in a movie theater in my hometown, going down to the movie theater over there and working.
It's great.
Yeah, but I think my time is better spent. I'll just be poor and not have any money and just work on my art for as long as
that's
I can.
how it and I guess because I grew up so poor, not having much. When I that's why I worked so hard in college. So like I like, oh, it's actually nice to have money. I can if I want something, I can go and get it. So that's the kind of things like, did I need that stuff? No, it was a need and want. And at that time, I didn't need some stuff, but I wanted to be able to get what I wanted to get. So I'm like, I'm just gonna work harder and get what I want to get. But if old me could talk to young me, I'd be like, fool, you don't need that stuff. Like, put more time into this stuff, which is actually more important.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that you did it right. So.
Yeah, I would still yell at old me. I had hair down to my shoulders. I would have told myself,
oh
wow.
Bring that in.
Yeah.
Big curls down. It was crazy.
We got a list of things we need. Is sketches.
Shocking reveals.
Yeah,
Picture.
Have a good laugh.
Yeah, please.
And I was probably about 35 pounds heavier. But I remember I played sports, so I was a big guy. That's what my wife says when, as I got older, I lost my neck. My neck came back because I didn't have a big old muscly guy.
Do you have a Gronk neck?
I did. I did. Now, a little skinny neck now, so. Priorities, that's all it comes down to.
Yeah. Neck size.
That's what matters the most.
You'll find out. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to your work in the industry. Coming down to the big stuff.
Alrighty.
How did you get in? What was your first? You were working freelance, putting all your time into your art as much as you could.
Yeah. So
how did that eventually get you into a paid job?
So it's interesting. So I'll even say my first freelance, just to kind of give where I had taught myself how to use 3D Studio Max, and a friend of mine saw a job posting somewhere saying for an animator. And I hadn't quite got into animation yet, and I applied and I showed them all my stuff, and they were like, "Cool, here's a test animation to do. Can you give us something by tomorrow?" And they gave me some files. So it was my first time doing animation, so I didn't sleep for 24 hours, and I put 24 hours into an animation.
Oh my goodness!
And like literally, I did not stop. I didn't stop. Maybe I got something to eat. My girlfriend at the time would bring me something to eat. She's my wife now.
Bless her heart.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm still with her, because she can put up with my crazy crap. So, so I got that, and I sent it back, and I got the job. So from there, it spindled into like, oh, you do modeling. I'm like, yeah. So I built them for 2 TV shows. I built sets and all that kind of stuff. And then that, I was doing freelance for that for at least a year or 2.
Was that physical modeling? Well,
3D
the set?
3D Studio Max.
Oh, okay.
So I built sets, little houses, and train tracks, and all this kind of stuff.
So you made like virtual models for the people to actually build the sets? Is that what you mean?
Or was it an animated show?
Oh,
animated show.
Oh, there it is.
So
okay.
I worked for
I was thinking
a
like
Christmas show called A Very Wonky Christmas. You can look at that if you want. It's pretty hilarious. I was a lead animator for a couple of those things,
Holy
which turned out pretty good.
we will watch that.
And
That'll be my Christmas
It'll
movie.
be hilarious.
This year.
I'll tell you though, one of the greatest moments of my career is seeing my name up on the TV screen. Like on Channel 5 it played. And I'm like,
got to watch.
I was like, holy crap, it's terrible.
It's got to be.
I'm
somewhere.
watching it.
But and remember, this is the first stuff I've ever done.
Yeah.
You'll see my animation in there, and it's hilarious.
It's like you at our level.
It can't be worse.
Yeah, it's pretty close. It might be a year or 2 older than you guys.
Wow, it can't be worse than Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah.
We don't like that movie.
Or Rudolph.
Yeah.
All
those classic.
Are you talking about the classic ones or the new animated crappy ones?
We didn't
I don't know. Gustavo.
Whatever ones
those. Those are
Remember, this is
amazing.
stop motion. Ed loves stop motion.
Don't cross me with that, because
He's
I will
good.
lower your grades. It's
Yeah, the power.
You don't even take it.
I'm not even. Yeah, but I have
I'll
2
find a way.
next.
Yeah,
I'll find a way.
He'll put a word in. Carry on. You were talking about building.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
building
so
sets for
I started doing
an
those
animation.
sets, and again, while I was doing that work, I was working full time in a warehouse. It was AT&T at the time, before Comcast bought AT&T and became that kind of stuff. So I was working in their warehouse. It was a great situation because, like I said, I'd get to work by probably about 6 o'clock, and the latest I would work would be 2 or 3, and I'd have the rest of the night to work on my freelance stuff. And that worked good for a while. And then I got a full-time job at K-On Interactive, which is still around. I still do freelance work for them now, but it was making product models, photorealistic product models, like telephones, computers, servers.
Wow.
And it was in a virtual reality. So it was low poly with high-res textures. And you would build this thing photorealistic. It looks exactly like a real object, and they had a little engine that would go online, and you could spin it around and look at it, and you could press a button, and it would open up, and you could give a tour of the product. And I did that for about 3 years. But the goal was always games, right? So, and again, I'm learning games. They didn't even have a fraction of the online stuff they have now. Back then, it was literally like you would be lucky to find 1 or 2 tutorials that you could find that would teach you something about games. So it was a lot of just trying to figure things out. And so I was a lead artist there at K-On, and I went to apply at, an important component is while I was doing the freelance stuff, I worked with a small company of just a couple of guys that it was indie before there was really indie. Mm-hmm. And they were just making a little mod, and they're like, we're going to make this game. And I made like some shields and some swords, and I put it on my resume. Didn't get paid for it. It was just something small that I did. But when I applied to Tilted Mill, they saw that, and they're like, oh, what did you do there? And I showed them some of the stuff that I made. And even though it wasn't something I got paid for, and it was, at the time, it was a laughable company, it made sense. Like, oh, we see that you did something there. And he actually liked that. And so I was a lead artist at K-On. When I went to Tilted Mill, they're like, well, you've never done any games, so we can't give you a mid-level position, but we'll give you junior. And I had to take a massive pay cut, which is about $25,000 pay cut.
Oh my God.
And I walked away, and I was like, yeah. They were like, you're just gonna. I'm like, yeah. It's not about the money for me.
But you were happy.
You can fail at stuff that you don't like. Why would you not try and fail at something you do like?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how my motto's always been. Like, always go for what you want, because I can fail at anything. Why not try and hey, I tried getting in there. So I did it. Best decision I've ever made. Within like 6 months, I was mid. It moved pretty quickly. I worked my tail off. Stayed after if they needed anything. I'd make sure and I did it. The hard work component is just, I can't even, it's so important to just work your tail off all the time, because if you're not working hard, someone else is working harder than you, and it's very competitive out there. Mm-hmm. So I went to Tilted Mill. I was there for almost, I think, 3 years. I got a lot of published titles out of there. We worked on SimCity Destinations, Hinterland, Mosby. There was a ton of great experience. I went through so much development there. It was amazing. And then they laid people off. They didn't close, but they just kind of went into this weird hibernating thing. They're still around, but not really doing much. And I went to work at 745. And I worked there for about 3 or 4 years, and that's where I kind of worked my way up there. Went in as an artist, then made lead character artist, art director, and kind of moved away and had a couple AAA. That's where some of the AAA stuff was coming from there as well. Mm-hmm. And then SNHU, it came into SNHU. Nice. I've always wanted to teach, and a friend I was working with 745 was working at WPI. He was leaving us to go to WPI. And I was like, oh, someday I'll teach. I'm like, I don't know when that'll happen. Then SNHU was trying to hire someone, so they talked to him to do a demo. And then when he found out they were trying to hire, he called me up and said, hey, I know you said you wanted to do teaching. So I came here and did a demo, and then they said, do you want to do a adjunct? And I said, yeah. So I did adjunct for about a year, and then they offered the position, and here we are. Here we are.
Wow. In the studio.
Nice. So that was a crazy walkthrough.
Yeah, it was a lot of
pretty incredible.
What was the span of that? That was like college to now.
15 years.
15 years.
That was 15 years.
It goes
by quick.
One of my big questions is, because you told us in our animation class that you one time, I think it may have been the one you just told us about, you got a job in animation not really knowing about animation. Can you still do that today, you think, where you apply and they'll see the other stuff you've done? Do you think people would still take on for an entry-level position with people with...
Yeah, people, well, the industry's so different now. It's a lot bigger. What I will say is, like, the smaller studios might take that chance on you. You're gonna see that. They need to see something that will impress. So yeah, I think it's still possible, absolutely, that someone will take a chance on you. Tilted Mill took a chance on. So I mean, I was doing some stuff that was not games. It was somewhat related because it was lower poly models with high res textures, but I didn't know how to make. I've never made anything for a game like really in development, so they took a chance on me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're still going to see that. The thing is, if you're a good artist, we're talking art on this, just for this, is really strong 2D stuff, or even if some of your stuff 3D is really strong, people will take a chance on you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's still that kind of possibility.
Cool. Did you have
I was just saying that for the people that heard our interview with Neil a couple of weeks ago, it's so crazy to hear the difference between how Neil got started in the industry and how you did, and it's really only like a 10 or 15 year difference in when you both got started, and it's just so radically different.
It is, yeah. There's a huge difference in how the industry is morphed.
How accessible it is now.
It is so like when I was in college, there were no 3D games.
Yeah.
3D hadn't come out yet. 3D games had not come out yet.
You couldn't just download an engine.
No.
You had to make one from scratch.
Software itself was like, you couldn't get any, software was nuts Photoshop was $900, $1,000, 3D Studio Max, which has actually been pretty consistent at like $3,500. They've been pretty consistent with that. But as a guy who's trying to learn something, you couldn't even download it. They didn't have free versions that you could download. And the whole like, oh, I found software, that wasn't even really big yet.
You couldn't even pirate things.
It was incredibly hard to do that stuff when I was in college, and I don't recommend anyone doing that, but it wasn't what it is now. Like you couldn't, it was impossible to find software. It was absolutely impossible. So technology wasn't there. Computers were so slow.
Yeah.
Oh, the good days. Yeah, it was just different. It was a lot different. There was no networking like there is now. Accessibility was non-existent. Just was non-existent.
So we glossed over a lot of companies and various jobs. What would you say were some of the best companies and the projects you were most excited about?
Tilted Mill was hands down the best place I ever worked. That environment was unbelievable.
What was it like?
So you just loved being there. Very open. The one thing I loved, every Friday they had game days. So you would stop working at like 2 or 3 o'clock and you would just play games. And then by 5 o'clock they had ordered pizza and beer and sodas and all that kind of stuff. And you would go and you would have to mingle for an hour with everybody because they want people to be together and know each other, not just sit in a desk and do your work. Cool. It was an amazing experience to be in there. It was just everyone from the CEO was an artist that worked at another game company that started this one. He was an amazing artist, shared everything with you that he could. But one of the best teams I've worked with. So 745 was really a great team when I worked there. It was a little bit more corporate, whereas the one I worked for was not. The people that I worked with at Tilted Mill were gamers the whole way through, where 745, it was a parent company of First Act, so it had a little bit more corporate to it. But the people there were amazing. People were there absolutely amazing. So Tilted Mill was my favorite, hands down, place I've ever worked.
What was it you were working on there?
Tilted Mill?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, SimCity, and that was my favorite. That was my favorite. Oh no, I'll say Caesar 4 was an amazing. It was my first. I don't know if it was because it was my first game or what, but it was just an awesome game to work on. And I would say it is first, but I think SimCity series was probably the very close second. We did some. I think we made between 4 artists. I think it was 4 to 5 artists. We made like 450 buildings in SimCity. It was nuts. It was. I mean, we worked our tail off, but it was.
How fast were you pumping out assets?
It was. You'd be making a building 4 days to a week, sometimes shorter.
Jeez.
If you had to, yeah. It was, and there was a lot. There was animation as well. Like I do this, and this actually goes in my classes. Is I think it was the GRA 202 was the first time I didn't do it this year, but the first model I ever made for a game was a fountain. So I make everyone in my intro to 3D Studio Max make a fountain just because that's what the first game model I ever made. I think this is the first year I'm a little more open. I let people do what they wanted to do, but that's the very first game model I ever made was that. And I did actually. I was an animator there too for some of these games, but it was more like when the real animators were doing their stuff, they would give it to me and be like, "Oh, we have some extra stuff here we need done. Can you jump on that?" And then I'd get better and better, and then. There was a huge technical part of it too, like how are we going to do all this kind of stuff that I love doing. I love getting into engines and digging around to see how materials work and how to hook things up. Not programming, not even scripting, but just the minutia of like all these little things. Like I love getting into shaders and tearing them apart and making them work. Like that kind of stuff in an engine's fun for me. Hooking up animation, that kind of stuff. I like doing that kind of stuff. So I'd help build pipelines with that as well. It's like how you get from your idea all the way into engine until you hand it to a programmer.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to do any of that kind of stuff.
But just a little bit of tech art.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely a tech artist as well.
Nice.
So, and I love that just as much as modeling. Right. Maybe not as much, but I did love it.
You say you're a tech artist, but do you have any programming experience?
Not a drip, sir.
Awesome.
Not a drip.
Good to know that that's still
not even I can't script any. I can't even script anything. Like when I say tech, it's more like understanding what things are doing for my art that's going in there versus like
how it works in engine.
Yes, I hand that off to the smart programmers.
Yeah.
I'm like, here, make that look awesome, and then they hook it up. I'm like, you did that all wrong. I need it to do this because that's not right. And then we yell at each other, and it's fun.
That's cool. So you're a tech artist as well, more than a tech art programmer kind of thing.
Yeah, it's tech. Yeah. So and it's weird. So we've hired tech artists at places that I've been that more built little tools for us, which was again not what I was really doing. Mine was just hooking stuff up. Versus one guy we're like, we need this exporter to do this. And he'd be like, and he'd write a script for it and give it to us. He could also talk to our programmers and understand some of the stuff that they were talking about. So he's this awesome little bridge between the two of us that he knew a little bit more than they did about art. And He knew a little bit more about programming than we did, and it was just nice. That's a position that's still around now. That's very viable to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Any more questions from you guys before I keep going?
Do you have one? Because I have one.
No, I'm good. I'm just listening.
And make sure if I start going off on tangents, that's what I do. Just give me the hands in the air like you are going to. You didn't even answer what your favorite game was.
So I have 2 questions. One of them
Please.
is what's your favorite game, but there's a spin on that we'll get to in just a second. So you've talked a lot about the amount of hard work that you put in, and obviously that's the right thing to be doing. But now you're much older, you're a husband, you're a father of 2, I think?
3 girls.
Three girls. So how do you actually balance your incredible workload and spending time with your family?
There's really 2 things that can that have to go, is extra like curricular stuff and sleep. So I'm going to tell you not much has changed since those days where I was telling you I was working in a warehouse. All that's changed is content. So I do my work from, we'll say I get up at 8 o'clock and I'm here till 4 or 5. I will leave. I will go home. I'll hang out with my family until my kids go to bed, and then I'll hang out with my wife until she goes to bed, and then I start up again.
When would you say you go to bed at night?
Early, 12:30.
And then you wake up at?
I get up at 5:55.
So just
So
getting
know
used
that
to
it's
the fact that you
12:30
have no
is
sleep.
no, I don't sleep at all. 12:30 is early. Usually it could be on average 1:30. If it's a night where I'm doing a lot of stuff, 3 o'clock, and then I just get up, a couple hours sleep. Body will just. I'm not Superman, so body shuts down sometimes, and I'm in bed at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. Body's like, you're done because you can't do that. So it happens when you kind of hit that wall. But that's on average. I average 4 hours a night.
That's incredible.
I gotta learn to do
That's
that.
super impressive. Would you say that that took time to get used to? Or has that always kind of been how your sleep schedule has been?
It's always been. Even those 4 hours. It's not a solid sleep. I don't really sleep. I mean, I'm always waking up and turning around, and my head's always thinking about something. That's the problem. It's like a lot of times I'd try to go to sleep and I'd just be sitting there spinning my wheels. So I'm like, well, I'm not gonna just sit here and sit in bed for 2 hours. I'm gonna go do something with this, and I'd go do something else. I've literally thought about sleep aids, but I'm like, I don't want to become dependent on anything, so I don't touch any of that stuff, and I just don't sleep.
Those are pretty scary.
So I don't touch them. I don't touch any of that kind of stuff. Even though people are like, you need to sleep, and I'm like, I'm still here.
Sounds like work hard, love the people around you, don't sleep.
Be a cyborg, essentially.
Yeah, you literally, if you want to be, I know this is gonna sound crazy to you, but if you want to be successful, that's what you have to do. Like you have to put that time in. That's the only thing that you can do. You gotta want it so badly that it's not. When I say I'm not up like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, I'm so tired. Adrenaline's pumping. I'm excited to do that's that passion thing. It's a blessing and a curse because I can't just press a button and turn it off. And it's hard for people who don't have that type of passion to understand. Like, what are you up till 3 o'clock? I'm like, it's not a choice.
Yeah.
It's what I do. It's just part of who I couldn't turn off. I want to. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, I wish I would stop thinking about this stuff. I just can't. My world, everything's around my passion, and it's part of who I am. I can't turn it off. So
yeah, that's interesting.
That's beautiful. I like that.
It's tough. It's a curse too. Don't trust me on that.
If I don't get like more than 5 hours of sleep, I am just sick the next day. So I'll
wake up not feeling good.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't feel good.
Power through it.
I do. I'm like, it'll go away in an hour or two.
Yeah.
It'll
Shove
go
it
away in an hour
down
or two.
inside.
That's
I do.
incredible.
I'm like, I get up and I'm like, ooh.
Do you eat breakfast?
I eat breakfast every morning.
You force yourself
I
to
make
eat
sure.
in the
If I have a tea and I eat either a couple granola bars. I don't always get to lunch. I get too busy and I don't get lunch. That's the thing is, when I talk about that passion is, you've got to. When I was learning this stuff, I was so passionate about it. I didn't eat. I didn't think about food. I just sat and loved what I was doing so much.
And your neck shrank.
My neck. I didn't go to the gym anymore. I recommend getting outside once in a while. It's bad for your body to just sit in a chair for 14 hours.
Yeah.
But that's what happened. Is my wife, my girlfriend at the time, would come home and say, Did you eat? And I'm like, no, not really. And she's the one who kind of said, get out of your chair. You've been there for 13 hours. You need to do something else.
That's crazy.
If I did, the truth is, I didn't meet her and she married me and get me out of it, I would just be sitting in front of it all the time.
Yeah, you would be withering away.
I would, but I'd have some pretty awesome stuff. So there's a balance. You can strike a balance eventually. But there's a friend of mine that works for Blur. He's a senior character artist over there, and he had the same thing, but he didn't have a family or anything, and that's all he did. He worked his tail off. He would be like all day working at the company, all night working there, get up, same kind of thing, but he never stopped. There was no like, hey, stop and hang out for a little while. Not to take away from his amazing talent that he had anyways, but he was so good he started posting on forums, and he had Blur, Blizzard, all these huge companies come to him and say, we want you to work for us.
That's crazy.
He's like, I don't know what to do. So he picked Blur 10 years ago, and he's now their senior character artist over there. He also went to school for biology.
Wow.
And he worked at big, huge games. He worked for them, I think in Maryland. They were in Maryland. He worked for them as an intern, and they were going to hire. They told him he wasn't good enough to hire. And I had another friend that was trying. So this is a good lesson in understanding. Don't listen to what anyone tells you. Mm-hmm. The only person that can stop you is you, and that is the absolute truth. If you want something, there's nothing that can stop you. Nothing can stop you from getting it, no matter what someone says or does. It's your call to make sure you do what you have to do. Sounds easy or too easy, but it's not.
Yeah.
And this kid worked at Tilted Mill, applied to this place, and the art director said to him, "You shouldn't be in this industry."
Wow.
Right to him. He's all upset. We're like, don't listen to him. So the happy ending is he works at Blizzard now.
Nice.
So it's you don't let anyone tell you anything. I don't care what someone says. Like if they try to tell you you're not good enough, it's like you can work your butt off and get good enough. It's just what your sacrifice is. Mm-hmm. Mine's time.
That's crazy.
That's all my sacrifice.
This is the stuff this is why I had Ed on the show, because he's got all this.
I told you though. I when I start talking about this, it's not even passion.
It's Sunday. You can
literally, I will not know. I'll just keep going with it.
I'm not even
Your
gonna.
wife is trying to get into the studio, telling you to stop. The door's locked.
It's like, get where is he?
I'm not even gonna do my usual inspirational bit at the end. I can't. I can't follow this up.
We'll have Ed.
So sort of going into how you work a lot and you have to sacrifice certain things. I know even just with me, pretty much anyone that gets into making games, you stop playing games more and more and more. I probably play games a tenth as much as I did back in high school. Yep. Partially because most games are garbage once you start working on them, and partly because you just don't have time.
Yep.
But not necessarily what's your favorite game, but what is the last game you played and remember really having a fun time doing?
It was a downloadable game that I played online with. You can be either a wizard, a knight, or a girl thief. Mm. It's completely leaving my.
Seems like the cliche trifecta.
It was Trine.
Yep.
Absolutely loved that game. Absolutely, like I could not get enough of that game. It was like the co-op in it was amazing. All the stuff. That game is amazing.
Did you play that alone, or did you play with your family?
I played with Lou tomorrow.
With Lou?
Yeah. And it's one of my favorite games. It's gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous game. Oh my gosh.
When did you play that? When did that come out?
So when it came out, when I played it, are probably two different things.
Okay.
So we were just kind of looking for a game to play, and I would say last year we ran through it. It might have even been we played the demo and like, hey, this is pretty sick. Let's go buy it. And we bought it for $10 and got all the downloads, and that's just an amazing game. Game. I would say the last game that I remember like being was Drake's Fortune was the second one.
Nice.
Didn't play the first one. Beat the second one. It was like, holy crap, this is like playing a movie, which was pretty amazing. And I just didn't get around to the third one. And when the fourth one comes out, I'll play that one and love it. So I don't get to play them at all.
Yeah, I'd be amazed if you get to play a video game.
And even when I play like the newest Batman that came out, I've had it. I've been in the world for about 3 hours, played the game about a half an hour.
Yeah.
So I literally walk around and look at games for hours, just looking around and play. Like Call of Duty, I'll get them and then go into my own match and just walk around.
Yeah.
And I do that. I literally do that more than playing games. Wow. But it's just because I love seeing all the stuff that's going on there. I like picking it apart, see what's working, what's not working.
I remember when I did that with Halo 2, I signed in with both controllers and then just walked to the characters together so I could look at the character like in the environments and stuff.
Yep.
I think that's kind of typical for developers. I was watching Mustafa play a game yesterday,
it's fantastic.
And I was just like, oh, how did they do that mechanic? Like, oh, it's probably something like this. This is how I could write that. Like, it's almost like once you start developing games, you stop finding enjoyment in games just from the gameplay, and you start finding enjoyment by how well it's crafted.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I was actually just talking to somebody about that yesterday. We were exactly the same things. Like, I don't have time, and when I do, it's different. I'm usually like picking it apart, what's working, what's not. Like I look for seam. I'm like, oh, there's a seam there. Oh, I see how they did that, and I'll pick it apart and see where the polys are. I'm like, oh, that's how they made their normal map, and I can see the geometry in there because I'm like right close up to it and looking at it. So. Yeah, that's very typical in the industry. Just some people have such passion for playing that they won't sacrifice that, which is great. Like you see, designers will play way more than other people because guess what? That's what they do. Mm-hmm. So,
which is incredible.
I'm
so jealous.
It is
when people can actually sit down and play a game for a long time. That's amazing.
Yes. We've answered all my questions except for the bonus question.
This is a good one.
Before you ask it, let me just say my favorite game of all time that I ever played was Phantasy Star 1 on the Sega Master System.
Was that the... No, Phantasy Star Online. Was that one was
well
different?
before that.
Okay, Phantasy Star 1 was way
There was no online before. This one was like 8-bit
Master System.
Master System, old stuff. It's like it's the equivalent of Nintendo.
Okay.
And it was one of the most amazing games I've ever played. It was just awesome.
Did you later play things like Phantasy Star Online?
I did. Yep, I started playing that, and then what happened was I can't play big games, and if they get too big, so I beat Phantasy Star 2. Of course, I played that one. Then once I started going online and stuff like that, I was fine. Anything that's sandbox can't keep me too long, and it's too big, and I end up not playing it, so I don't really get sandbox games anymore.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I literally need something that's very linear, and I play everything on easy.
Nice.
Because I'm like, wow, I don't have all the time to do this, so... Like a Skyrim, like while I love how it looks, there's just no way I'd ever be able to play it. I just don't have the time to. 80 hours. I'm like people are like 6 hours for a game. I'm like 6 hours for a game. That's good for me. I like that.
Beat that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't have, but I've put 32 hours into Fallout so far. So
not a bad thing. Jealous of it.
I mean, for me, it depends on like I put 200 hours into Xenoblade over the summer because
that's some time.
Beautiful game.
Yeah.
All right, so bonus question.
The bonus question was Lou Tomorrow. What's your most embarrassing Lou Tomorrow story? Because he is Lou Tomorrow. For those that don't know, is another friend of Ed's for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Did you work at Clifton
I went to college with him. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've known him that. Our careers are very similar.
Yeah.
The only difference is I came here, and he went to Turbine. That was the only difference.
And he's here now.
And now he's here.
Yeah, he's here too. He teaches our 3D modeling class.
Yeah, he's an adjunct here, so we're back again. So an embarrassing story for him.
Bear in mind, you said we should get him on the show, so he'll probably have a counter story.
It's not a story, but it's just a fact. There's a Chili Willy tattoo on his arm.
I don't know what that is.
Chili Willy.
Funny,
look it up. It's a little penguin with a hat.
Oh,
yeah. So he may hate me for that one, but
does he try to hide it?
Listen to that.
Well, I don't know if he hides. He'll be proud of it, but I think he might be like, "Why are you telling people about my Chili Willy tattoo?" That's what he'll say.
He sounds like that.
He does.
That's funny.
This is Chili Willy.
Let's take it.
Oh wow!
That's the
door.
Oh, I see him. He's a cutie.
Cute little penguin.
That is a good tattoo to have.
him.
Is that his only tattoo? Because that would be hilarious.
It is not his only tattoo.
If it was,
Maybe he
that would
wishes
be
it was, because some of them are pretty bad. Let him know I said that.
Okay.
Wow.
Hopefully he has just as much dirt on you.
Yeah, that's why I went easy on him.
Really?
That was easy.
Nice.
That was easy.
Wait, you have to go at, what did you say, like 1:30? We have 5
1:30,
minutes, maybe?
1:30, 1:40, something like that.
To talk about whatever. Any other questions? It's funny because that you pushed carts at Stop and Shop because Mustafa did that.
It's
terrible.
last
It's
time.
an awful thing. Yeah, I did it for a whole summer. Urban Providence. Worked a lot of holidays and stuff. So
I hated working those. Like I worked at when I was working at Walgreens, I'd be stocking shelves, and I was like, I'm not doing this. And but I like working with food. Food was pretty good. I was doing pretty good cooking. My grandmother was happy because I was in the kitchen. But yeah, then I knew what it was I was gonna get into. So
is food as big a thing in your family as art?
Yeah, I'm Italian, French, Irish, and Colombian. So the Italian and Irish, which is my mother, she's half Italian, half Irish. The cooking is crazy. Like we grew up, we grew up poor. So my aunt and my cousins and my mother and my sisters and brother, we all lived in one little apartment. There was probably 8 people in a 3-bedroom. That's how I grew up. So it's like my cousins are more like my brothers and sisters. But food was a huge thing. We'd have dinners and that kind of stuff. We still do on Sundays. We'll go to my mother's and have food and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it kind of brings it together. That kind of stuff. So family is pretty important still. That's why I make sure there's that time.
Yeah. When you get back from work and it's time for you to hang out with your family, you sort of try to shut it all off.
I would love to, I try, but what I don't, because I can't, I can't shut it off. So what I do is I do stuff with the girls. Like, we draw, we create stuff. So I'm able to still satisfy that craze in me that won't ever turn off. So and they love it. So I'm like, all right, get your sketchbooks out. We're gonna sit and draw something, and I'll say, name me an animal. When you see my daily sketches and you see creatures or animals, I'm telling my kids, what do you want me to draw? I want you to draw a monkey with dinosaur claws. I'm like, okay, and then my kids will draw something, and then I'll draw what they draw. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. We'll build stuff. So
how old are your kids?
10, 7, and 5.
So they're still pretty young to kind of know what they're into, but obviously you knew that you were into art when you were very young.
Yeah.
Are they sort of following a similar art path, or are they kind of going off on their own thing?
They are, so it's interesting. So my oldest, who's 10, has been drawing dresses and said she's going to be a dress designer since she was probably like 4 years old. Nice. She's been saying that, and it's always, that's what she's like, I'm going to do that when I get older. My middle one is starting to, she draws, so she's getting really good at drawing. And then my youngest, again, and I don't know if I'm just biased. I try to ask them, well, do your kids draw like this? Is this just, because I want them to be, of course, I want them to be all artists and amazing artists. Yeah. So if they're not, it's fine. But of course, I'm deep down, just be an awesome artist. I don't care what you do, just be able to do that kind of stuff. But I guess they're starting to have a little bit more than other students have. So that's there, but we draw every day. I draw with them every day. So that's how I do it, is I make sure they're with me.
You should consider yourself very lucky, because my dad is a fisherman and has 4 sons. Every single one hates fishing. With a burning passion. I think it's because we've all been on at least 5 very unsuccessful fishing trips, and so we just don't like it.
I don't know what fishing either. My brother and father are huge fishers. They love fishing all the time. Just not for me. I come from a long line of truck drivers as well. And when I got to college, they were trying to get me to, look, you don't have anything. Why don't you go jump on this truck? I was a truck. My brother drove trash. My cousins do. My dad was. So this long line of truck. My grandfather drove buses. And so I just said, that's not my path. It's just not what I'm going to do. I'll work in a little crappy warehouse in the morning and keep working at what I want to work at. So it's that same kind of thing. They tried to push me into that corner, and I was like, I didn't let anyone stop me to deter me from what my goal was.
So you must be doing a good job easing your daughters into as opposed to.
But they also driving around.
I will tell you this: I had actually this conversation with my father-in-law, and I don't care what they want to do as long as it's something they want to do. I don't care how much I'll help pay for school, whatever it is. Like I said earlier in the show here, is if you can fail at something you don't like doing, why not fail at something, or try to do something and fail at something you do like doing? The weight in that for me is huge. That's why I try to tell them, is whatever you want to do, you have to love what you do. Because you can. I come from my comes from just hard workers that didn't do necessarily what they loved doing. And my father always said to me, he always said that to me. He would be because he didn't like what he was doing. He's just make sure you like what you're doing. He's and everything else will just fall in place. If you love what you're doing, it doesn't matter how much money it is. It'll come to you, and you'll be a happy person. So that's kind of what I took from my father. I say to my kids, and words to live by.
Yeah.
Very inspirational.
With that, I think is a good starting point. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real miracle that you could, and that it didn't conflict with any Radio SNHU shows. It didn't conflict with any of our classes.
Yeah, what a nightmare.
Any of
I'm all over the place.
You had a minute. So thank you so much.
You get me talking about stuff I love, and literally, when you asked me that first question, I went on for 15, 20 minutes.
Different stuff.
It's exciting.
You got all my questions, and even without being prompted, it was amazing. A lot of people listen from obviously the major and the game designing club. Is there anything you want to say to them? Your closing words, another little just piece of wisdom that you want to throw out there, and then I'll hit stop, and we'll be done.
I think that what I said earlier is probably the best thing I could say. I think that's really don't try and fail is okay, but make sure you're trying on something you love doing. That's really it is. And here's the thing that I say is your mindset should be, I can never be outworked. Right? People are going to come by with more privilege than you, more talent than you. You can never be outworked. You can just sacrifice something. But maybe it's sleep, maybe it's a movie, maybe it's playing games. But you can outwork talent. You can get there. You're talented and you work hard. Hey, double bonus for that. Work hard. Never let anyone try to outwork you. You can work your tail off. And people are also like, how many hours does that mean? There's no time I can put a stamp on that. That is you. How long it takes you to learn and get through it and push through it. But that hard work is just. It's the key to being working. It's literally the key. Your talent, maybe, but that hard work will push you over the edge of it. So never be outworked.
Wow. Ed Brillant, thanks so much. Thanks very much for listening, everybody, and we will be back normal time on Wednesday. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.